Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gents. Today I'm switching gears for something a little lighter and hopefully more fun. We're diving down a rabbit hole into one of my favorite hobbies, one that not everyone might find interesting, and hey, that's okay. You can't win them all, but stick around because I might just change your mind.
Pearson Sharp.
So apparently there's some bogus study that came out, I guess this was back in August, and I'm just seeing it now, that basically says you're a loser and totally unattractive to women if you play video games. In fact, it puts video games at the top of a list for the least attractive hobby a man can have, right up there with collecting figurines and magic tricks. They put online trolling as the fourth most unattractive thing, which is funny because I have a sneaking suspicion this list is actually online trolling. But it doesn't matter because a lot of women jumped on the so-called study and said, "Right on, sister." So this was shared by Liz Wheeler. She said, "This is beyond a red flag, like deal breaker zone. It's weird that so many dudes don't get this." Well, I think it's weird that so many women don't get this. Now, I know Liz. She used to host a show at OAN. She's great. I really like Liz, but I have to disagree with her on this one. She's not alone though, because a lot of women do hate it when men play video games. And in fact, one of my friends has a wife who made it clear he's actually not allowed to play video games. She hates it so much. And look, I get it. There's the stereotype of the South Park gamer guy who does literally nothing else besides play Warcraft while his life and body fall apart around him. And to be fair, I've known several people like that, people who do absolutely nothing else with their lives besides play video games. Warcraft specifically, oddly enough. In my freshman year at uni, I knew a guy who skipped the first month of classes when Warcraft came out. He just locked himself in his room, and that's all he did. I know people who have spent tens of thousands of hours playing this game in particular to the exclusion of everything else. Friends, family, a love life, none of it mattered. One guy I knew didn't wash his bed sheets in over 2 years. Now, I don't know if that's related to his Warcraft addiction, but it seems relevant. And if you're a girl, I can understand why that's a turnoff. But that entirely misses the point because that behavior is a problem not with video games, it's a problem with that person. They have an addictive personality and can't control themselves, or they're depressed, or they have some other issue. Because I've met plenty of other people with other hobbies who were just as annoying or unhealthy. I used to go bouldering, and man, you meet some weirdos in there. Same with skiing. In fact, I went to school in Boulder, and actually, maybe that was just a weird town, but I digress. The fact is, I love video games. I love them. I think they are a fantastic form of storytelling, one of the best we have as a species. They're a form of art, and I'm not joking. And I think demonizing them because a few people can't control themselves is the same argument that anti-gun people make about guns. I've always been a computer gamer. I've never gotten into consoles. I don't like the controllers. I can't hit crap with a controller. But I've been playing computer games since I was, 2. I used to sit on my dad's lap and he'd fire up their finest hour. And he'd hop into a Spitfire and he'd let me push the space bar to shoot down ME-109s over the cliffs of Dover. And I loved it. That's one of my favorite memories. Then I vividly remember playing a game where you paint dinosaurs, and another game where you play as Mickey Mouse and solve puzzles. Mickey told a bunch of jokes, and I still remember some of them. How do you catch a squirrel? Climb a tree and act like a nut. That was highbrow comedy to a 5-year-old. There was another game called Ultima Underworld Stygian Abyss. Isn't that an incredible name? So much better than what we get now. Unknown 9 Awakening. Just meaningless slop. Anyway, in Ultima, you run around a dungeon and you fight spiders and drink potions, and to this day, I clearly remember playing with my dad and being super excited to fight the spiders. And then, of course, the original Doom came out, but my dad wisely wouldn't let me play that. A little too satanic for a 7-year-old. And how about Kid Pix? You remember that one? I had so much fun with Kid Pix. It was such a great tool to give kids to let them be creative and explore their artistic skills. I've even let my 2-year-old play with it, but I think coordinating the mouse and the keyboard with actions on the screen is still a little over her head. And Wing Commander 2, where you fight these giant alien cats in a starfighter with live action video featuring Mark Hamill before he went crazy.
Pretty slick flying, sir.
Thanks, Chief.
And just a slew of World War II flight sims, like Secret Weapons of the Luftwaffe, which taught me so much about airplanes and history in the time period. I clearly recall spending hours on a mission flying a B-17 over Germany, waiting to arrive at the target and listening to the tinny, comforting drone of the engines. There was another game, and I will be eternally grateful to anyone in the comments who can help me figure out what it is, where you had these blank scenes and you basically put in all the elements you wanted, the trees, the rocks, the animals, and then you could animate it and you could add music to it. It was phenomenal. I created so many cool stories with that game. And that's my point. Games are wonderful learning tools, and for kids, they can let you express yourself in ways you can't do anywhere else. I used to play a lot more games than I do now. I've got 2 kids and hopefully more someday soon, God willing, so I'm lucky if I get an hour or 2 a week to play, even a month. I've never been a big multiplayer fan. I love single-player games with great stories, games you can immerse yourself in with beautiful art and worlds you can explore and get lost in, like Skyrim, back there.
Take care with those flames.
I specifically remember playing Batman Arkham City, a terrific game by the way, and wandering into a random bathroom in some old warehouse and just marveling at the level of detail. There were boxes and magazines and pictures on the wall, broken tiles and spider webs and dirt on the floor, and mops and buckets and all these 1,000 little details that made the room absolutely real. And it hit me as I was taking in all these little mundane details that someone, a person, put them all in there in real life. An artist drew all of these things, designed them in the game, and then hand-placed each and every one of them into this tiny, random bathroom that probably no one else would ever see. And this artist put them in there for me to look at, to give the game more realism, to make it feel more believable. But the point was that an artist, a real-life person, had created all of these things and put them inside the game. And that really hit home for me. This wasn't just a game, it was art. Another great example is the game Assassin's Creed Origins. So you play in ancient Egypt, which right off the bat is one of my favorite periods in history. And you start out in this temple that's been buried under the sand. And you walk into this huge open chamber that is just breathtakingly beautiful. You can see all these fallen statues and pillars and this massive vaulted ceiling with these intricate little gold stars painted on this brilliant blue sky. And it's completely enthralling. When I found this room, I just sat back in my chair and stared at the screen for a good 10 or 15 minutes, just soaking in the atmosphere. It was so lifelike and real. It transports you to another place in history. It lets you go somewhere you could never go in real life, somewhere you've only read about in books, someplace that doesn't even exist anymore. But I got to go there in a video game. That's one of my favorite games of all time, and I spent countless hours just wandering around Egypt, exploring these tombs and imagining what it would have been like to really be there. And the developers are aware that people do this. They actually have a game mode where there are no enemies or combat. You just walk around all these real-life historical locations that the developers visited themselves and photographed and scanned and mapped to make them as realistic as possible. And the game teaches you about their history and what happened there so you can explore them for yourself and learn about one of the most incredible civilizations on Earth. How can that be a waste of time or unattractive? In Assassin's Creed Odyssey, you go to ancient Greece, and it's so realistic that a university actually uses the game to teach their students about Greek history. Something else I think is important to mention is that video games have actually changed my life significantly. Some of the most important interests that I have, the things that I'm most passionate about in my whole life, I discovered through video games. I'll give you an example. Let's start with Vikings. It's safe to say that I am a Viking fanatic. I have somewhere around 40 or 50 books on Vikings. I'm not joking. Books on Nordic culture and history and Norse mythology, and I've read them all. In fact, I'm currently reading another book right now, at this very moment, called Norse Mythology by Scott Lewis. I have personally traveled all over Scandinavia just to visit famous Viking historical sites, Viking settlements in Iceland, Ireland, England, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Russia. I even went to Istanbul in Turkey to see the Hagia Sophia, where Viking members of the Varangian Guard carved their names into the stone balustrade overlooking the central hall. I've taken half a dozen university courses on Vikings, including a course from Oxford University just last summer. That was just for fun. And all of that massive chunk of my life devoted to studying and literally traveling the world to explore Viking history and culture, all of it is because of one video game I played back in high school called Age of Mythology. My friend casually gave me a copy because he wasn't interested in it, little knowing he was handing me the keys to a lifelong obsession. I was immediately enthralled at the stories of Norse mythology in the game, something I'd somehow never heard of before. I got totally lost in the world of Vikings and their seafaring adventures, and I bought countless books that I couldn't stop reading. I remember being a teenager working in the kitchen of a restaurant washing dishes, and on my break, I would flip over a wash bucket and sit in the corner behind the freezer and read these stories about Thor and Freya and Odin and all the rest of them, opening up these wonderful new worlds in my imagination, all because of a single video game that apparently some women who've never played a game in their life think is a waste of time. I'm not mad, that would be silly, but I think they are holding extremely ignorant opinions. It's the same thing with Chernobyl. Back in 2002, I discovered this game called Stalker, Shadow of Chernobyl. It's basically an alternate history horror story about a mercenary who gets sucked into a life and death struggle to uncover the mystery of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. I was hooked from day one. I read anything and everything I could get my hands on about Chernobyl, and I even went as far as writing this big short story about Chernobyl and some monsters that lived there, and I sent it off to the game developers. Years later, when I found out they were going to tear down part of the power plant in real life, I booked a ticket and I flew to Ukraine to see Chernobyl for myself. I got special permission from the government to explore the power plant and Pripyat, and I got to wander through all the old abandoned streets and the apartment buildings with a sense of disbelief that this was actually real, and that after all these years, I was really there. I can't really say what fascinates me about Chernobyl, but it tickles every part of my brain you can think of. The desolation, the mystery, the abandoned buildings, the Soviet art, and the architecture. It's lonely, haunting, otherworldly, like it shouldn't exist, but it does. The tragedy of the story is horrifically sad. All the lives needlessly lost because of the hubris of communist tyrants. Since then, I've started work on a documentary about Chernobyl and my time there, and I'm also writing a novel that ties into Chernobyl, kind of a sci-fi horror story. And again, all of this was inspired by a video game I played when I was a kid. So tell me, how is any of this bad? How is any of this a waste of time? The simple fact is that it's not. These are rewarding pursuits, and I regret none of them. My fascination with Tibet and Tibetan history and mythology can be traced back to the 2014 game Far Cry. My fascination with the military and what motivated me to apply for the Marine Corps was the 1998 video game Half-Life. It's probably for the best that I have asthma and they wouldn't accept me because I absolutely hate being told what to do, and I don't think that would have gone over well with my COs.
Why, you little maggot! You make me want to vomit!
But for a 13-year-old, becoming a Marine Force recon, and that was the stuff that dreams are made of. My love of World War II history probably owes a good deal to the 2001 game Return to Castle Wolfenstein. That's also what jump-started my fascination with medieval German history and actually prompted me to take 4 years of German language courses when I started university. Do you see my point? I can't speak to mindlessly losing yourself to an addiction and escaping the problems in your life with an unhealthy gaming problem. But clearly, you can get a lot more out of gaming than what some people think. And getting immersed in good stories and maybe even learning some life skills is just part of it, because despite the antisocial stigma, gaming can also be an incredible bonding experience. My dad played computer games back in the day and he made friends all over the country, and some of those people became my friends too. There was this guy named Matt who I used to play Star Trek games with. He was pretty nerdy and we got along really well. But we had some really deep discussions that meant a lot to me at the time. Unfortunately, Matt was pretty unhealthy and actually had a heart attack and died when he was in his 40s. His death hit me pretty hard, to say the least. But that was because he was my friend. He was somebody that I cared about and somebody I met and bonded with because of video games. So again, tell me, how is that a bad thing? Here's another example. My best friend lives in Colorado, halfway across the country, and we've only gotten to see each other in person about 5 times in the last 15 years, which is really sad. The perils of having jobs and families. But on Saturday nights, we log on and play a game together for an hour or two, and I get to hang out with my best friend. We catch up on each other's lives and spend some time together having fun shooting some zombies or whatever. So instead of just sitting on the phone for an hour, which I don't know many guys who just call each other up and talk on a regular basis, we get to do something together. We get to spend some quality time together, and it just happens to be through gaming. So I'd ask all the women out there who hate gaming, is that wrong? And I still play games with my dad too. We don't find time very often, but we play some Warhammer together every now and then. And I tell you what, there is no quality time like sending in an armored space marine and mowing down hordes of ravening heretics with your dad. Should my dad and I not do that? Should I not play an hour or two of video games a couple times a month because some femme-splaining women think it's dorky? Well, that don't bother me none. And I'm introducing my daughter to the hobby now. Like I did with my dad, she sits on my lap and we play Star Wars together. Or her absolute favorite, the original Half-Life from 1998. She is obsessed with Half-Life. She loves the zombies and the head crabs and points out the barnacles and the bull squids. She wants to know about the planet Zen and the Nihilanthe, and she tells me to watch out for the Vortigons. She's only 2, mind you. She's so into it then when we're having dinner or I'm putting her down to sleep at night, she'll ask me to tell her Half-Life stories. She'll say, "Daddy, tell me Half-Life stories." Sometimes when she's playing with her toys, she'll be talking to herself and I hear her saying, "Oh no, the G-Man is coming. Gordon, hide from the Gargantua." And I'm just like, yeah. That's a proud dad moment. That's my gamer girl. Now, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is something that she will remember fondly her whole life. Something that we shared and made a memory together. Gaming with her dad. I will never feel bad about that. All that said, and we haven't even mentioned building computers. That's an entire hobby unto itself, which is incredibly fun and rewarding. I built my last 2 computers, including that one there. I've built computers for my father and for friends, and it's a ton of fun picking out parts and sitting there figuring out how they all go together and testing the system and seeing how it works and playing with the settings, tinkering with the different parts until you have that glorious moment where you push the power button for the first time and it boots up. It's a ton of fun. And with all due respect, I think that people who make fun of us gamers for enjoying our hobby are simply ignorant and uninformed. But that's my take. What do I know? Thanks for sitting through this tangential rabbit hole of a video about my odyssey with video games. It ain't much, but it's honest. And I felt like sharing. What do you think? Do you like to game? Can you keep the addiction in check, or are you LFM, Kara, PST? And what are some of your favorite memories gaming? I want to hear from the ladies too. What's your opinion of guys who game? And has watching this video changed your mind at all? Let me know in the comments below. I'll end with this. Gaming, for me at least, isn't just a hobby. It's art, education. It's deep personal connections you can't get anywhere else. So never let anyone tell you it's a waste of time. As always, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, and don't forget to tell your kids that communism has failed every time it was tried. Till next time, stay sharp.